Don't mess up your gear by taping down knobs or marking your settings. With Lock Knob, you can lock down your settings and protect them from unwanted movement. You'll never lose your signature sound.
Those are some big tones from big businesses. Jared, how you doing, Jared?
All right, man, not so bad.
Good, man. I'm glad you could join us. It took a pandemic to happen for us to do this rig rundown, but I'm glad that we have you today. I'm in Nashville, you're in Los Angeles, so let's get to it, man. People probably obviously know you from big business when you guys morphed into Melvins as well, and if you're a super fan, you know him from Carp back in the 90s. But let's dig into what your big business setup has evolved into, because I think when it started, it wasn't quite as massive.
No, it wasn't maybe quite as massive. It's gotten a little more complicated for sure.
Should we start with the bass? Kind of go from there. Because I know you played jazz basses most of your career, right?
Did. Well, I played Squires for most of my career, but when I joined the Melvins, I felt compelled to have pro gear as well as a pro attitude. So I bought two proper jazz basses. They were identical. They're the same. This one is all stock. I didn't do anything to it at all.
Okay.
Same everything. Nothing fancy.
And why the jazz over the precision? You know, those are the two basses people, you know, in the Fender world that really gravitate towards.
Right. Yeah. I didn't get hip to a P bass. I didn't. I come from punk rock, and the punk rock bands that I saw when I was growing up. In particular, there was a band, Unwound, who were a couple years older than myself, and they were kind of our big brother band, big brother, big sister band, big sibling band. And Vern, the bass player, he played a jazz bass, and it was just, I don't know, he played one, so I guess I thought that it seemed like I should play one too, I guess. So it was just a matter of circumstance, really. At the time, I didn't have the money for a real jazz bass, and so I just bought a Squire because what I could afford, and it served me well. I appreciate a Squire's roughness around the edges. I think it particularly lends itself well to distortion or effects because it has a little bit more of like. It's a clean palette, I guess, more so than a P bass.
Gotcha.
I think if we had a guitar player, I own a P bass now that I play, you know, for my own enjoyment, and in, you know, various projects or whatever. But I think P basses are great. I love the way they sound. I like them when other people play them, especially myself. With effects and stuff, I think a P bass is hard to. A P bass wants to be a P bass no matter what, and it will always sound like one no matter kind of how much stuff you put on it. Has been my experience anyway. That it's hard to make it not sound like a P bass is super difficult. And with a jazz bass, it's easier. It's more flexible, and I feel like I can kind of just put anything on it, and it'll sound like what I want it to sound like. That said, I think if we were playing with a guitar player, like if we ever played with a guitar player again, I might use a P bass. for some of that, because I think P basses are great when, with a guitar. But as we're trying to kind of make up a lot of tone, just being a two-piece, I kind of need that flexibility. I need the ability to kind of layer stuff.
Now, you've mentioned it already with Toshi and Scott being the guitar players in the band. Have any of your gear choices been predicated on that, having a guitar player in the band, and now again not having the guitar player in the band, like knowing you had less sonic space and now you have more sonic space again to fill up? So like any gear acquisitions that you have specifically with that in set or in mind?
Yeah, I mean, when we started, we were just a two-piece, so I was, trying to compensate from the get-go. And then when we had Toshi at first, I didn't really scale back so much. Toshi had a very like a lead guitarist's tone, I guess. It was often pretty clean, and he was playing pretty clean parts. So I didn't really have to do much in the way of making room for him. When Scott started playing guitar, I had to make a little more room tonally because he had a more like metal guitar sound, I guess, for lack of a better descriptor. And so it pretty much stayed the same. And then once we were a two-piece again, I've kind of added several things since then to kind of up the game a bit. I started playing with a sampler, and so we run some samples during some songs. And that's connected to a volume pedal, so I can kind of rock the sample in and out as need be. And then I've added a bunch of stuff. I got, a Mel 9 pedal based on the Mellotron. Right. I got one of those when it came out, and I was really excited about it when it came out, and I got it, and I played it, and I was like, oh, this doesn't do what I want it to do, or it just wasn't as... I mean, it's for guitar. I don't think it's designed for bass so much either, which is just kind of my cross to bear as a bass player, I guess. But then I kind of got into it, and I really liked it a lot, and we ended up using it on a couple songs on the last record. And now I use it almost all the time, or I have been in writing the new record anyway.
Do you have a favorite setting, or because that knob, I know that Mel 9 fairly decent, that I know that there's a lot of options on it for the sounds you can get out of it. Is there like a favorite setting you go for?
The strings setting, I guess, or it's the orchestra setting, where it's the number one, it's the everything or whatever.
Gotcha.
And it's cool because it does exactly what I want it to do. Once I learned how to use it, it fills the space and gives a grandeur to otherwise, not so stunning riffs. Maybe, I don't know. But I like.
Can we hear some of that grandeur?
Oh yeah, sure. I was playing at the beginning, but it's just it sounds great because in combination I run a POG through a high channel, and that takes care of. It goes into the Mel 9, so it already has kind of an organy feel when it's going in, and then it just processes it a little more, but. And I like that too a lot because you can really, you can alter the attack and how long it hangs and everything, and you can really like let it sustain and be its own thing. I think it also adds, it adds some nice harmonics to what's going on, and gives a more is more feel.
What to kind of circle back and finish up the bass talk? What did you do to the other jazz bass that you have? Because you mentioned that one is all stock, and I'm assuming that the other one is not.
It's not. It had. I put a badass bridge on it, and it has some lace pickups in it. I don't remember which exact lace pickups they are off the top of my head, but yeah, but. With the amount of effects and stuff that I'm using these days, it's subtleties like pickups or things that I'm less focused on things like that, less focused on pickups and whatnot, and more focused on just adding more stuff, I guess. Apparently, that's what.
What do you use for strings?
I use Dunlops. I use the extra heavy drop set, which is like, what is it? 120, 100, 85, 65, something like that, I think.
And what do you guys typically tune to, or what do you tune to?
Generally, I tune to B, F sharp, B, E is what I play generally.
And then to kind of follow up on the more is more comment you put is, why not have you ever dabbled with a 5 or 6 string bass, or are you kind of just like 4 is enough for you?
4 seems like plenty for me. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I don't feel like I'm ever missing a string when I'm playing, or I feel like the highs can get plenty high and the lows are plenty low. So especially like how I tune, and I've got some octave stuff going on. It's just more strings, more problems.
Well, speaking of more again, you got a little bit of a mountain behind you, so you want to walk us through kind of what's going on there, because you got a lot of Sunns.
There are some Sunns, indeed. Okay, so this guy, it's my newest buddy. This is my Hilbish preamp, built by Hilbish Design by Nathan Hilbish. He gave me a sweet deal on it, and I really appreciate it. It's the preamp version of this, basically. The Sunn beta bass, and have always used Sunn beta basses. I picked one up at off an ad in the paper back in the day when I was 18 or something, and I loved it because it had built-in distortion, which is not common for a bass amp, obviously. And then they make the beta lead, which is identical for guitar. I've heard different views on how they're different, or some I don't know. I'm not sure how exactly they are different, the bass versus the lead. But I have all the high signal, including the Mel 9, the Pog, a super overdrive to give it some extra grit. Goes into this guy and is powered by this guy, and then I push, each channel goes through one of these down here. So there's a no-name 212 over here that I run through, and then a Mitchell 212 over there. And they both have pretty distinct sounds, even though I'm pretty sure they have the same speakers in them. I think they're just some like stock Marshall straight cab speakers. But the Mitchell is real heavy duty. It's much heavier. It's actually filled with sand. I don't know if you've ever played one of a Mitchell, but a friend of mine, I was carrying it around and bemoaning that it was so heavy, and they're like, oh, well, they're filled with sand, ha ha ha. And I just thought it was a joke. And then I had to drill some holes for some new casters at some point, and I realized as we were loading out of clubs, there'd be a trail of sand on the way out. And so it's true. They really are filled with sand. I don't know. I think they were designed for jazz players maybe, so just to have a super tight, clean tone. But it really holds its own. I've had it for years, and I really like it. I think if I had to just, play one cabinet, somebody forced me to play one, that would be the one, because I feel like it gets everything done. But the two of them together make a real nice sound, I think. So that's this guy, and then I go through a Maleko Heavy Industry Bassmaster, which is a clone of the Brassmaster pedal, and it does pretty much the same thing. It's a fuzz with a bunch of cool, has some sweet frequencies on it.
Well, I was going to ask how you use that different than the Pog. I know that the circuitry in the Maleko has like the fuzz in there, but it's still an octave pedal. So are you using that for like the lower octave, and the Pog is more higher stuff?
The Pog and the Mel 9 going into this is all like kind of the high frequency, and then I have like a mid frequency, and then this takes care of the low stuff, basically. So I kind of think of this tonally, and when I'm talking to, when I'm working with sound folks that are unfamiliar with our sound, you know, I describe this as like the lead guitar, rhythm guitar, and then the bass, like in terms of mixing it and miking it. And that seems to work out okay. So yeah, I run an MXR modified overdrive into the bass master, and then that goes into this Sunn Beta, which powers it's a 115 cabinet, like a, what do you call it? Folded cabinet.
Okay.
It's made by, was made by Monolith, a now defunct company out of Portland. But yeah, they were custom made. They're supposed to be based on some Sunn bass bins, old Sunn bass bins. And the idea was to make them smaller and more compact, but they ended up just being bigger than the original ones I had. So, but they sound great. And so one goes through, signal goes through the Beta into one of them, and then the other signal goes through this Coliseum 300, which is pretty minimal effects-wise. The only thing I run it through is a micro pog for a sub-octave on like a couple songs. But other than that, that's the only effect on that channel, and that goes through another Monolith 115.
Do you, two questions, do you have like a diagram? Like you figured this out to map all this? And then second, how much trial and error to get, because you have so, you know, effects running through each amp that has like kind of a different signal flow. So how much did that take for you to get where you're at today?
It took this long, I guess.
So you're constantly always evolving, changing.
Yeah, it changes a lot. I mean, I just picked up a bass whammy the other day. It's the first pedal I've bought myself in quite some time, and I've been goofing around with that a lot. I've been using that with like the sample and stuff in order to change the key of the sample, give us a little more flexibility with, you know, any sample we have, so it's not just one drone the whole time. I can actually change the notes of it, which will be nice. But yeah, I was actually dreading having to take a picture of this pedal board because it's just a mess. And maybe that's okay. Maybe people need to know that sometimes things get real dirty.
I was gonna say, you know, sometimes, you know, it's real life. It's not the internet. This is real life.
Yeah. So, but generally it does change a lot. I mean, kind of the constants are the pog through the high channel just to create a much higher, you know, lead guitar frequency, and then you know, just some overdrive through this guy, and then this guy stays pretty clean. So it's very much like just trying to create the tones that you would for an entire band. So with that in mind, it's not, it didn't, you know, it's always a work in progress, but there are some constants, I guess, that tonally that I keep going for the most part.
And the Hillbish, did that kind of sub in for the Galen Kruger? Because last time I saw you with Sleep in 2019, I believe you had the Galen Kruger then. Is that kind of where the swap happened?
No, I was this guy, the Coliseum 300 I used to play a long time ago, and I just swapped it out recently for the GK actually.
Okay.
I like the GK just fine, but I also like this guy, and I don't know, just because I've been screwing around by myself, it's just been a lot of fun to revisit it as an amp. The Hillbish replaced just another Sunn Beta that I had that was doing the same job. But this guy, it does sound different. You know, it's modeled after this, and it sounds much cleaner overall. And it sounds like a Beta, but different, but in a good way. I found that this thing is great with effects. Like, it handles effects much better than this guy does. I don't know how much experience you have with the Betas, but they're noisy as hell. Like, they're just, I don't know how much this is even going to pick up just sitting here. Like, how much hum it just, with nothing on it, just makes a lot of noise. But I was asking Nathan about that. I was like, well, why is it that you know, why would it sound different if you're using these? He was like, well, the betas are just old. Like all the components are old. It's the sound of old is what you're listening to when you hear like, and that never occurred to me. Like just with vintage amps and people like, oh, I really like the vintage sound, and it's not the same. I was like, well, of course it's not the same. It can never be the same because it's not 60 years old, or it's not, and so there's something to be said for the tiredness of components, and just the character that brings. So with all that said, that's why I really like having the Hillbish, and I like having the old Sunn as well to kind of mesh those sounds.
It's current between the new and the
Right,
old.
full circle.
Man, I feel like with that intro you provided, and anyone that's a fan of you knows that a lot of your sound happens at your feet. So I'd love to just dive in and you kind of just show us some go-to or core sounds that you use with their pedals.
Sure. Yeah. I'll take it. I guess low, medium, high. I'll have to turn off my amp.
Okay.
I don't have a selector switch for any of these. They're all kind of going at the same time, so I have to look like a total lame-o and turn my amps off and turn them back on one by one. But anyway, this is the low guy, and that's with through this guy, through 115 and just the micro pog with just the sub octave, and I use that for a couple songs where the rest pops in, and then otherwise it's just a clean bass sound. So nothing super fancy. In the past, I've put some distortion on the low frequency too. But there's plenty going on, and so it's nice to have just something that's clean. In addition to like a DI, that you get some nice clean tones. Mm-hmm. And then this is the mids, which is it's an MXR modified overdrive, and I also swap out a MXR 78 distortion pedal sometimes. Particularly, I like to have it with me when we're touring in general, just in case another pedal takes a crap or something. But I always take it with me to Europe for sure, just because I'm never sure what I'm going to be using, and it's nice to have lots of different things to work with in case things don't sound like you want them to sound. And that happens, a lot of the time. So this is the MXR into the Bassmaster. And this pedal's great because it has like a harmonic switch on it that can really change. You can kind of hear and that, since the sensitivity knob on that thing is really crazy. Like you can get some really blown out crazy stuff happening. I highly recommend that pedal for anybody who, particularly a bass player who it's great for guitar too. But for anybody who kind of wants like an intro into a good distortion pedal or a fuzz or something like that for bass, I think it's a good start.
Good training wheels.
Yeah, well, I mean, but it's also for advanced players as well. But but in terms of kind of getting like doing lots of different things and doing it well, and just kind of being able to be satisfied very quickly without a lot of knob turning is nice. So that's that guy, and then the Hillbishen family. This one also runs through the MXR overdrive, and it splits after the overdrive, and then that goes into a Boss Super Overdrive. which was the very first pedal I ever owned, was the Super Overdrive pedal, and I used that almost exclusively as my only distortion or effect until I joined the Melvins. And when I joined the Melvins, I started getting a couple more things here and there, and then since then it's been off to the races. But I will always stand by the Super Overdrive. I feel like maybe I should take back what I just said about it's your first starter pedal. So if you're gonna get your very first two pedals, should be. But yeah, the Super Overdrive has a special place. I think it's cool for bass. It does, you lose, it scoops out a lot of bass tone, but it does add like a really cool grizzle to bass in the mid range. That's really cool, and I've always really appreciated. So yeah, that goes. So MXR Overdrive into the Super Overdrive. I don't always have the Overdrive on. Into the Pog, into the Mel 9, and that sounds like everything else. So that's that. And then without the Mel 9, it sounds similar. Yeah, so that's it for all the
Man, the Mel 9 makes it sound like a dark orchestra, which is very appropriate given that we're only a few days away from Halloween. It sounds haunting.
Yes, and days away from other possibly horrible things too. Who knows? Yeah, I really like it a lot. It's a lot. Like, it's a very. I just kind of gave into it and let it do its thing, and like, you hear a lot of it on the new record for sure.
Well. And can we hear it again all together? And then is like everything, when you got it all up and running, is there pretty much everything on? Are you running everything like on, like the rest of your pedals are always on?
Everything's always on. There's, like I said, there's just one song, I think, where I have two tuners running, like one tuner going into another tuner as my like A/B pedal, basically.
Yeah.
Just because I had two tuners laying around, I didn't want to spend money on another splitter pedal, A/B pedal. But so yeah, other than one song, everything's on all the time. I don't always have all the overdrives or all the all the other the effects on necessarily, but all three are generally always going.
How about like I know I've seen on your board before like a delay pedal. Sometimes it's a carbon copy. I've seen like the DD series. How do you use the delay with your setup?
The carbon copy comes at the very end of the chain on this guy. It's real subtle. Sometimes I have it on more. Right now it's not on. I haven't been using it that much lately. But I will use it for, if there's a part in a song or whatever, a lead part or whatever. But that's about it in terms of delay. I do have like an echo, a Maleko echo pedal that I run the samples through to give the samples some delay or whatever. But and then the only other thing I have is I have a ditto pedal for the vocals, which I can't demonstrate because I'm using all my mic cables for this. But it is a looper pedal specifically for vocals. They make one for guitar too, but it works great. And you just click it, make your sample, click it off, and it'll just keep running. And I've used it a lot in the last couple of years for both live and recording, to be able to create harmonies that kind of stay for the duration of a chorus or something like that. It's cool. I've been having a lot of fun with that too. And then it's also really handy for songwriting, or if you're trying to come up with vocals or lyrics for a song, to have looping capability is super. I find super handy. So, yeah.
And how are you using the loopers on the board? Are you building like soundscapes that you kind of go on, or I know that you sometimes have 2 loopers on the board.
Yeah, the loop, I use a 720 Electro-Harmonic 720 looper for the samples, and none of them. I used to build them live before I had that pedal. I had a Line 6 that I would just, I would make a quick sample at the beginning of the song, and that would just run, and then that just became difficult in a live setting, or just kind of, having to stop and like make a sample before you start the song is kind of silly. So that thing will store, I have several, 10 samples, I think. And so I've just pre-recorded a bunch of samples, and then, I just pick which sample I want before the song, the corresponding song, and do it that way. What
else are you working with? Is there anything else you want to show us on the pedal board, or you think you kind of covered it all?
Well, let's see.
Or like sounds. People die to hear some different sounds. I know that you have a lot of nuances and like dynamics within your songs.
I do.
I know a lot of times it's volume and stuff, but there's a lot of colors you paint with.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much did it. There's not. I mean, really, it's just it doesn't really vary that much from that, other than obviously the Mel 9 brings out a big color to it, but the rest of it is pretty straightforward. It's just, some distortion and some overdrive and I use the bridge pickup. I turn up my bridge pickup all the way, and I turn my tone down all the way.
Okay.
That also helps kind of rein in the effects, like kind of give it more of a, I don't know if it's a compressed sound, but it's more of a, I don't know. I find that with treble up, particularly on bass with effects, it can get real clanky and real just too much, I guess. And that's kind of the problem with bass distortion and bass overdrive, I think, is that it's hard to get enough without it being too much. And it's kind of like what I was talking about with the P basses. I've always, anytime I've tried to put effects or make a P bass sound like I want it to, I just can't do it. It's too much bass for me.
And is that a reason why you play, you pick with the pick instead of using your fingers? And I'm sure maybe other projects or things you might fool around playing with the fingers for different tones, but a lot of times I've seen you play with the pick.
Yeah, I exclusively play with the pick. I never learned to play with my fingers. Once a year, a couple times a year, I'm going to try to play with my fingers, and I don't know. I just don't have it's a totally different skill set, and it would, be easier for me to jump into as somebody who's played bass otherwise for a long time. But it's a totally different thing, and especially with effects, I don't know. Different people can. It's just not my thing, I guess. Ultimately, I have been playing. I'll show you this guy. This is a Concert Mate MG1 made by Realistic, which was the Radio Shack company that made electronics. And this thing's great. It's got a lot of... I use it on a few songs on... there are a couple songs on Command Your Weather. And not some... I used it a little bit for texture stuff on our last record. But it'll probably be featured pretty prominently in the next record. This is what I've been sitting around. This is what I've been doing for the last 6 months, basically. So I've been learning to play with my fingers on this. I've been trying to get better at this. This one's in a state of disrepair, and the other one is being repaired, or I would play it for you. But this thing's awesome. I've had this thing since I was, like 18. I bought it at a pawn shop for like $80, and it's an incredible keyboard. It's polyphonic, which is something you don't find very often in older synths, especially Moogs. Yeah, and this guy's really cool. Like the filter on this thing it makes a really gnarly dinosaur sound, I guess. And I run it through. I just run it through the same effects that I run everything else through. That I run my bass through. So yeah, it sounds similar, but being a synth, it has a much bigger, fatter tone, and yeah, I've been trying to get my ebonies and ivories in order lately. Be some of that. So.
Man, that's such a huge sound to pair that with your already massive bass setup. So that's you're moving a lot of noise.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a really cool synthesizer, and I have other synthesizers, and that's the one I always come back to. One, because it's polyphonic, and two, because I just think it has a really cool sound, like very unique and distinct. Yeah.
What do you use the dinosaur sound for? You had mentioned that. I should have asked that sooner as a quicker follow-up. What do you use the dinosaur sound for?
I use it on songs as you would. A lot of times people think, or particularly on the last record, I got a lot of comments or people, oh, the synth stuff sounds great, and there's really not any synth stuff on the last record. Not anything I would play live, I guess. There's some like texture stuff here and there, but yeah, so it's mostly pedal stuff. I'm trying to think of what songs in particular I used the realistic on. Another Beautiful Day in the Pacific Northwest. I think it's on our second record.
Oh, okay.
That's all that guy. Let's see, what's the other song? There's a song on Command Your Weather that's all the keyboard that we played, and I guess that's the only one that's just it's the lead instrument. But yeah, like I said, I plan on it being a lot more prominent in the next record, and should we ever get to play live again, it'll be we'll play it live too. Yeah,
I was gonna say, that it's good news that I heard that you let me know while we're trying to set this up that you and Coady are just about to start practicing again. So that's exciting. Hopefully, you'll take 2021 by storm because you guys love to tour.
Well, if that's if 2020 hasn't already been destroyed by some other storm, or 2021 hasn't been destroyed otherwise. Yeah, fingers crossed. I don't know. Who knows what will happen? It doesn't seem like anything's going to happen for at least a year, it seems like. Fortunately, Coady has been very busy buying recording equipment over the last couple of years and has set himself up with a pretty nice recording studio in here. And he's gotten pretty good at it. So our plan is just to record our own record and just get as much done as we can while we're locked in these walls.
Not allowed to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, Jared, I thank you so much for setting this up and making it all happen and figuring out the technical difficulties in the audio execution, man. This is a treat.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Likewise, it was a real honor to be asked to do this. I don't know how many other bass players you guys get to do this, so that was it's especially exciting for me to infiltrate the premier guitar world with my bass. And I thank you for the opportunity.
We try to, but it's funny how often a lot of bass players will be, well, no one wants to see my rig because I only have a bass and one pedal. So you're a perfect candidate for all those pedal people that love pedals, and you just have a good stack of gear. You remind me in your setup a lot like Lou from Dinosaur Jr., just walls and amps.
Oh, yeah,
and cabs.
sure. Yeah, I appreciate those guys, their aesthetic in that regard, of course. I'm a big fan of anybody who piles more on top of more for the sake of more. It's the American way.
On that note, us two Americans are going to sign off. Thank you again,
All right,
Jared,
man.
for your time. All right, everyone stay safe out there.
Stay
Thank you guys
safe.
again.
Peace out.